My name is Ethan Carter, and for the past 3 years, I've worked the night shift at a private security company stationed just outside a small industrial town. The site I guard isn't glamorous, an old manufacturing complex that shut down in the late 90s, long before I was even born. Most buildings are empty shells now, gutted by time and neglect, with paper-thin walls that groan when the wind pushes through their cracks. The company that bought the land uses only one of the buildings. The administrative block to store documents, machinery parts, and archived equipment nobody bothers to catalog anymore. They keep me here to make sure no one breaks in, even though nobody ever tries. Night after night, I wander through dim hallways that smell like rust and wet concrete. The only sounds are my footsteps, the buzz of old fluorescent lights, and the occasional echo you can't quite trace. I used to listen to music to kill the silence, but after some time working nights, you develop a strange respect for it. Silence becomes a living thing, something fragile, something you don't want to break. But I need to say this from the start. I was never afraid of this place until that night. The night I realized I wasn't alone. It was a Thursday. My shift started at 11, like always. The air outside felt unusually heavy, as if a storm was forming somewhere far away, but slowly crawling closer. I remember thinking that the place felt different, more awake, like the entire complex was holding its breath. I brushed it off. Fatigue, I told myself. Just another long night. I made my first rounds, walking the perimeter with my flashlight, checking the old chain link fences, kicking aside scattered debris. Everything looked normal, too normal. Even the stray dogs that sometimes roamed the property were nowhere in sight. Inside the administrative building, the air was warm and oddly humid, as if someone had just taken a shower, even though there was no functioning plumbing. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, throwing long, nervous shadows across the walls. By 12:30 a.m., I sat in the security office, sipping cheap coffee and staring at the grainy surveillance monitors. 12 cameras covered the hallways and entry points. Usually the screens were lifeless, showing nothing but empty corridors and stairwells. But around 1:05 a.m., something changed. Camera 6 covering the second-floor hallway glitched. Static washed over the feed for a second, then stabilized. There was someone standing at the far end of the corridor. A tall figure, perfectly still. I leaned closer, squinting. The image was dark, blurry. The cameras were old and cheap, but I could see the outline clearly. A person, facing the camera. But here's the thing. I hadn't heard anyone enter, and I was the only one with a key. I sat frozen, watching the screen. The figure didn't move, not even a slight shift of weight, just a shadow, and yet unmistakably human. My first instinct should have been to call the police or radio for backup, but I couldn't move. I just stared at the monitor, waiting for the figure to walk, or wave, or do anything. But it didn't. After what felt like several minutes, I finally snapped out of it, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped into the hallway. The air out there was colder, as if someone had opened a window. But I checked. Every window was sealed shut with metal bars. I slowly climbed the stairs, each step echoing far louder than it should have. When I reached the second floor, I stopped. The hallway was empty. I swept the flashlight back and forth, searching for any sign of someone, footprints, disturbed dust, anything. But the floor was untouched. Yet when I looked up at camera 6, the small red recording light above it flickered. I went back to the office. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, I told myself, but from adrenaline. When I sat back down, I glanced at camera 6 again. The figure was back, but closer now, halfway down the corridor, still not moving. My throat tightened. I leaned in again, trying to see details, but the image was too degraded to make out a face. Okay, I whispered to myself. This thing is broken, just broken. I switched to camera 5, covering the stairs leading to that hallway. Empty. Camera 7 covering the opposite end of the corridor. Empty. Camera 6 again. The figure was only 10 feet from the camera now. Still perfectly still. But something was wrong with the silhouette. One shoulder looked higher than the other, almost unnaturally. The head tilted slightly to one side, as if broken. I felt a crawling sensation in my spine, a cold sweat forming at the base of my neck. Then the screen flickered, and the figure was gone. I exhaled shakily and rubbed my eyes. It was late. I was tired. Cameras were old. Shadows play tricks. But then something happened that I still can't explain. A sound came from the hallway. A single, light footstep, right outside the security office door. I froze, listening. Another step, slow, deliberate. The door had a small window frosted glass, enough to see shapes and shadows. I held my breath, waiting to see movement on the other side. Nothing. But the sound didn't stop. It moved past the door, down the hallway, away from me. A slow, dragging step. And then silence. I didn't know what to do. Every instinct screamed to leave the building, get in my car, and drive home. But I forced myself to stay professional. I had a job to do, and if someone really broke in, I needed to find them. I stepped out into the hallway. The air was colder than before. My breath didn't quite fog, but it felt close. I walked slowly, listening for any sound. The hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit and suffocatingly narrow. At the far end, a door to the archives was slightly ajar. I remembered closing it earlier. My heartbeat grew loud in my ears. I reached the door, pushed it open with my foot, and swept the room with my flashlight. Rows of metal shelves stood like skeletons in the dark. Stacks of dusty boxes, old projectors, broken office chairs, outdated machines, everything drowned in shadows. I stepped deeper inside. Something shifted behind me. I turned sharply. Nothing. Just shelves and darkness. But the moment I turned my back again, I felt it. The distinct sensation of being watched. Not imagined. Not paranoia. Something was in the room with me. I backed out slowly, refusing to turn around, refusing to give whatever was behind me the chance to move unseen. When I returned to the hallway, I closed the archive door gently. The moment the latch clicked, a loud bang echoed from inside the room. Something had slammed against the shelves. I took several steps back, shaking. My heartbeat felt like it was rattling my ribs. I didn't open the door again. I went back to the security office, locked the door, and sat down, trying to steady my breathing. The cameras flickered. Camera 6 came back on. The figure was standing directly in front of the lens now, so close its shape blurred into the static. But there was one detail I saw clearly. The head wasn't tilted anymore. It was straight, as if it knew I was watching. I stood up, and the power went out. The entire building drowned in darkness. Not a single light. Not even the hum of electricity. Just me, my breathing, and the memory of footsteps outside the door. I fumbled for my flashlight. When it clicked on, the beam shook in my hand. Something scraped across the floor outside. Slow, dragging. I stepped back until my shoulders pressed against the wall. Then, through the frosted glass window on the office door, a shadow passed. Not a normal shadow. Too tall, neck too long, movement too smooth. It paused right at the window, a dark silhouette motionless. I held my breath, my hand gripping the flashlight so tightly my knuckles whitened. The shadow didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then it bent, slowly, deliberately, as if lowering its head to look inside. I backed away, shaking uncontrollably, and then, just as slowly, the shadow straightened and walked away. I stayed frozen for several minutes before I could move again. I tried calling my supervisor, but there was no signal. I tried the landline dead. The building was completely cut off. At 3:47 a.m., the power returned on its own. The lights flickered to life, cameras rebooted. I watched them one by one, every hallway empty, every room untouched. But camera 6. The lens was cracked, deep, straight across the middle, as if something had pressed a finger against it with inhuman force. I didn't finish my shift that night. I walked out of the building and waited outside until sunrise. I haven't told anyone, not the company, not my friends. No one would believe me. But I know what I saw. And I know one thing. Something walked those halls with me that night. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. Something that still knows I saw it. And every night since then, when the sun goes down and the world grows quiet, I feel like it's waiting for me to come back.